The smell of diesel hung heavy in the air as the early morning sun rose over the Mercedes dealership. Workers swept the polished floors, setting out brochures and coffee for another day of catering to rich customers who wanted to feel powerful behind a wheel. Then, the glass door swung open, and every head turned. A man stepped in, his boots caked with mud, his jacket frayed at the sleeves, and his hair streaked with gray. His face was tanned and wrinkled, like someone who'd lived years on the road or under the sun. The salesman behind the counter froze for a second, exchanging looks that said, "What's he doing here?" The man walked slowly, studying the shiny lineup of brand-new Mercedes trucks. His hands were rough and scarred, the kind that told stories of real work manual labor, construction, or maybe something tougher. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but confident. "I'd like to buy 5 of these." The room went silent for a moment before one of the salesmen's slick hair. Pressed suit, fake smile let out a short laugh. "5 trucks, sir? These are Mercedes Actros, not tractors." His coworkers snickered quietly behind him. The ragged man didn't react. He just looked at the salesman, steady and patient. "Yes," he said, "5 of them. I'll pay in full." The laughter grew louder. Another salesman muttered, "Maybe he wants to test drive them all the way back to the junkyard." Even the receptionist tried to hide her smile. But then something shifted. From the corner office, a woman in her 40s, the dealership manager, stepped out. Her nameplate read, Samantha Reyes. She had seen enough people come through those doors to know when someone wasn't bluffing. "Gentlemen," she said firmly, silencing the laughter. "Sir, if you'll come with me, I'll handle your request." The ragged man nodded politely and followed her to her office. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly as Samantha closed the door. "I'm sorry about that," she said. "You said 5 trucks are? You sure that's what you want?" He smiled faintly. "Yes, I've been saving for a long time. I run a logistics company overseas. My trucks were destroyed in a flood. I need replacements immediately. I came straight here from the airport." She blinked, surprised. "Overseas? May I ask where?" He handed her a business card. It was worn but real, printed with the name Zhang Wei Director, Pacific Freight Lines. Her eyes widened slightly. She'd heard of that company. It operated one of the biggest freight routes across Asia. Outside the office, the same salesmen who had laughed were leaning near the glass, whispering and trying to listen in. One of them whispered, "Did he really say 5 trucks? He's bluffing." But then they froze as they saw Samantha's expression change. Her professional smile became sharper, more respectful. She stood, shook the man's hand, and said something that made their jaws drop. "Mr. Zhang, we can process your order today. We'll have all 5 trucks prepped and delivered by tomorrow afternoon." The laughter turned into stunned silence. The ragged man, Mr. Zhang, walked out of the office a few minutes later, followed by Samantha, now addressed him as Sir. He didn't even glance at the men who had mocked him earlier. But as he reached the door, he paused, turned back, and said quietly, "You shouldn't judge a man by his jacket. Sometimes the dust on a man's clothes is the price of the empire he built." Then he walked out into the sunlight. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then Samantha turned to her staff and said coldly, "He just paid for all 5 trucks in cash. Learn something from that before you lose your jobs." The color drained from their faces. Outside, Mr. Zhang stood by the curb as a black SUV pulled up. A driver stepped out, bowing slightly before opening the door for him. The salesman inside watched through the window, realizing they had just laughed at a man whose company could probably buy their entire dealership. But what they didn't know was that this visit wasn't just about trucks. Mr. Zhang had come for another reason, something far more personal. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to set over the dealership, Samantha sat in her office, replaying the morning's events in her mind. Something about Zhang Wei's calm, composed demeanor lingered with her. He didn't seem like a man simply buying trucks. There was a quiet sadness behind his eyes, something deeper than business. Then her desk phone buzzed. "Ma'am," the receptionist said nervously, "Mr. Zhang's assistant is here. He wants to discuss a partnership." Within seconds, a young man in a dark suit stepped into her office carrying a leather briefcase. He introduced himself as Daniel Wu, Mr. Zhang's senior aide. "Mr. Zhang wanted me to deliver this," Daniel said, placing a folder on her desk. Inside were contracts, official documents from Pacific. Freightlines proposing a long-term supply partnership with her dealership. Samantha's eyes widened. He wants to make us their main supplier? Daniel nodded. Appreciated your professionalism. The others, not so much. He values respect. He said you reminded him of someone. Samantha blinked. Reminded him of who? Daniel gave a small smile. His late daughter. That line hit her harder than she expected. Then Daniel continued, lowering his voice. Mr. Zhang lost his only daughter 3 years ago in a car accident. She was studying in America. He came here often after that, quietly, without telling anyone, just to walk around the places she loved. One of those places was a Mercedes showroom, just like this one. Samantha felt a lump in her throat, and he still came back. Even after. Yes, Daniel said. He believes kindness can still be found in people. Today, he wanted to see if that was true. Her heart sank. The laughter, the mockery, the judgment from her own staff, it all flashed before her eyes. Was this a test? Daniel nodded again. Exactly. Mr. Zhang wanted to see how your team would treat someone who didn't look wealthy. You were the only one who treated him with respect. Samantha leaned back, speechless. Outside, the same group of salesmen stood by the glass doors, watching as a convoy of 5 brand-new Mercedes trucks rolled out of the lot, their engines rumbling like thunder. Each truck bore the logo of Pacific Freightlines, freshly printed on the doors. Then, to their shock, Mr. Zhang's SUV returned. He stepped out, this time dressed in a crisp navy suit. The transformation was startling. His hair was neatly combed back, and a Rolex gleamed on his wrist. The ragged traveler from the morning was gone. He walked inside, his presence commanding silence. Gentlemen, he said calmly, I came to thank you. Your dealership will be handling all future vehicle orders for my company on one condition. Everyone stood frozen. He turned to Samantha. That condition is that she runs the partnership. A murmur went through the room. One of the men who had mocked him earlier forced a smile. Sir, we're very sorry for the misunderstanding earlier. Mr. Zhang raised a hand, cutting him off. No need for apologies. Just remember, people can buy anything they want in this world, except respect. The man dropped his gaze. Samantha watched as Mr. Zhang's demeanor softened. He said quietly, when I walked in this morning, I wasn't sure what I'd find. But now I see that kindness still exists, even in places run by business. She smiled faintly. I was just doing what felt right. He nodded. That's what my daughter would have said too. Before leaving, he handed her a small white envelope. Consider this a thank you, he said. After he left, Samantha opened it and found a handwritten note inside. It read, When life tests you, remember true wealth isn't in your bank, but in your heart. You passed that test today. Tucked behind the note was a check made out to her dealership for $500,000 as a loyalty bonus. Samantha sat still, the paper trembling in her hands. Outside, the convoy of trucks disappeared into the golden horizon, their engines fading into silence. The salesman who had laughed earlier stood speechless, realizing that they had just witnessed a man with more class than any of them could ever buy. And somewhere on the highway, Mr. Zhang looked out of his window at the setting sun and whispered, You'd have liked her, May. The wind carried his words away soft, gentle, and full of peace. Never judge people by how they look. Sometimes the most powerful stories hide behind worn shoes and tired eyes. If this story touched your heart, share it, because kindness once shown has the power to change everything.